that's really hard to find in one place. And I want to tell you that when I was taking your advice, I was up in the mountains this summer and I got a tooth infection, and you know how bad abscesses can hurt.
Oh, yes.
And so I remembered you saying something about garlic. We couldn't leave because our truck got a flat tire and we were really stranded for a couple days. And I started taking a bunch of garlic. I just swallowed it whole because I didn't want to chew it. And so within like 24 hours, the relief had started occurring. And by the time it was over, I didn't even have an abscess anymore. I just went into the doctor and took care of the tooth. But I was just impressed by that because I think abscesses are very difficult to get rid of.
Mm-hmm, they are. In fact, if they're really bad, I don't know if there's anything that the dentist can do other than just pull the tooth and give you antibiotics, which, of course, we already talked about how well those usually work. But
right.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story, Sherry. Thank you for sharing that.
I have another one.
Oh, go ahead, by all means.
The other day, probably about maybe 3 or 4 days ago, my friend called and she said she and her husband and 2 other people in their house were sick with the flu. And 2 of them had been sick for about a week, and my girlfriend and her husband had just gotten sick like a couple days ago, and I told them to start taking large amounts of garlic cloves. And she called me today and said she got fast. Well, she took the garlic, and her husband did too, and they are well, and the other people are still sick.
Wow. That sounds very familiar. There's a familiar ring to that in my life as well. That is a great story. Thank you, Sherry. That's awesome.
Yeah, your garlic must be amazing for all kinds.
You go, girl.
Okay, and now I have a question about a dog. I think my daughter's dog has hyperthyroidism. We looked it up in the vet book, and it seems like that. And I was just wondering if there's anything we can give her. We don't want to take her to the vet and put her on pills for the rest of her life. Mm-hmm. But she gets a swollen neck, and her neck starts twitching, and she gets really like unable to move and stuff.
Okay.
So, is there anything a person can give a dog for something like that?
Absolutely. The same things that apply to people generally apply to pets, except that pets occasionally have just a special issue that they're prone to, or a different dose. That's about it. Other than that, I give pets the same herbs and the same things that I give people. And let's see, did you say hyper or hypothyroidism? Is it underactive or overactive?
Well, I don't know. Her neck swells up. I think it's overactive because she goes outside, and if she gets really cold, it comes on her. Okay.
Is she very heavy or very skinny or in between?
She's heavier. She's a little Chihuahua, but she's kind of like bigger than all the other dogs.
Okay.
Because she's fat, but she doesn't really eat all that much.
Okay. And does she tend to be very hyper, or is she a little slower moving?
Slower moving.
Okay, sounds like underactive to me, just as a preliminary idea. It sounds underactive. And what I usually do for underactive thyroid, one of the main things is kelp. Kelp is very high in iodine, which the thyroid needs to produce the hormones that it produces. And kelp is the richest natural source of iodine that I'm aware of, in any food, I should say. And so it's fantastic for helping the thyroid to come up to a place of balance. I don't like to talk about stimulating or suppressing, because that's what medicines do. They make our body do something. What kelp does is, of course, it just nourishes the thyroid gland and enables it to do what it was designed to do. So it's just bringing it back into balance. So if it's underactive, it'll bring it up. If it's overactive, it'll bring it down. But kelp would be fantastic. And also, Dr. Christopher's mullein and lobelia combination is one that I love for all kinds of glandular problems. It's 3 parts mullein leaf and 1 part lobelia herb. And that's lobelia inflata. There are several different lobelias. So you want lobelia inflata. And so 3 parts mullein to 1 part lobelia. And you can make tea, you can do a fomentation, you can make a tincture and add it to her food or her water. There are 1,000 different ways to get it in her. And the kelp, I would probably just sprinkle it on her food. It tastes pretty fishy and oceanic, So I guess it just depends on the dog's taste buds, whether they like it or not, kind of like people.
Right.
But,
and what you're feeding them.
Exactly. Yeah, and if they're used to that kind of thing, it'll just blend right in. If they're used to something different, they might hesitate for a minute, but just make it clear that that's what they're getting, and they'll eat it when they get hungry enough, and they'll get used to it. And it's also possible to give them pills and put it in their mouth way back and rub their throat. That's what a lot of vets will tell you to do with the different pills that they sometimes give them. But if it's small, you can just put it in their food or crush it up. And so with the kelp, you can do that. The kelp is a powder anyway, and you usually get it in either in capsules or a jar or something. It'll be a powder.
So how much would you give like a 10-pound dog?
10-pound dog. A great way of figuring dose is, and my favorite is by body weight. I think that's about the most accurate. And so you put their weight over 150, and that'll end up being a fraction, and that'll be the fraction of the standard adult dose that you give them. So the average adult, we figure, or the person taking the average adult dose, I should say, is 150 pounds. In America, the average adult is more than that, but that's our standard dose where we start with it. And so you take 10, put it over 150, she would have 1/15 of the adult dose. And I believe a standard adult dose for that would be about 2 capsules 3 times a day. And depending on the product, it may say a different thing on the label, but I would start with 1/15 of the dose for a 10-pound dog. And if that doesn't quite seem to do the trick, then increase it a little bit until it does. But that's